I thought it would just be another camping trip with my straight best friend, but when his sleeping bag broke and we had to share mine, something happened in that tent that changed everything between us. My name is Nathan, I'm 25, and if I could live anywhere, it wouldn't be a city apartment or some downtown condo. I'd be out here, somewhere wild, somewhere the trees are older than people and the sky isn't interrupted by skyscrapers, somewhere you can breathe without hearing traffic in your lungs. That's why I planned this trip, a full weekend in the Olympic National Forest. No Wi-Fi, no deadlines, just pine needles underfoot and stars overhead. And Alex. I tried not to overthink that part, but it wasn't easy. We met 3 years ago during a sophomore environmental science lab at university. He'd spilled an entire jar of river sediment across our shared desk and cursed under his breath, and I laughed loud enough that the professor shot us both a look. We spent the rest of that semester as lab partners, then coffee buddies, then friends, and somewhere along the way, I fell for him hard. He was everything I wasn't: open, charming, golden, the kind of guy who could make a stranger feel like a lifelong friend in one conversation. Alex had this way of talking with his hands, of leaning in when something interested him. His eyes always sparkled when he was passionate, especially when he talked about conservation or sustainability or anything involving nature. But Alex was straight, or at least he'd only ever dated girls, and I kept my feelings to myself, buried like old roots under a forest floor. Still, when I texted him a few weeks ago, feel like disappearing into the woods for a weekend, he didn't hesitate. Hell yes, he replied within seconds. When do we leave? So now here we were, standing outside my packed Subaru in the fading light of a Friday afternoon, loading the last of our gear into the trunk. This is going to be epic, Alex said, tossing his pack in with a satisfied grin. I need this break so badly, work's been insane. He reached up to adjust the roof rack, and his t-shirt rode up just enough to show a sliver of skin above his waistband. I looked away fast, focusing on tying down the tent poles, pretending I didn't notice the little line of muscle that curved above his hip. Still at the consulting firm? I asked, my voice as casual as I could make it. Yeah, lots of desk work lately, though I'm itching to be out in the field again. He jumped into the passenger seat, plugging in his phone before we even left the driveway. As we pulled out onto the highway, his playlist started: indie folk, alternative rock, a bit of acoustic stuff that somehow made the trees blur past the windows even more peacefully. The drive took 3 hours, with Alex as my personal DJ and road trip commentator. He talked about everything: his coworkers, the ridiculous client call he'd had last week, the plant he was trying not to kill in his apartment. Every so often, he'd sing along, off-key but enthusiastic. Ming his fingers on the console in rhythm, I listened more than I spoke, like I always did, but I soaked it all in. He made everything feel lighter. Halfway through the drive, he turned to me grinning. Remember that sophomore year trip to Mount Rainier? I groaned. Don't remind me. You tried to start a fire with 2 sticks and YouTube confidence. I almost had it. We ended up eating cold beans from the can because you were too proud to admit defeat. I laughed, shaking my head. Yeah. At least I didn't forget the can opener. He smirked. Touché. By the time we reached the trailhead, the sky was streaked with soft lavender and gold. The air had that earthy pine sweet scent I never got tired of. We parked and grabbed our packs, shouldering them in practiced silence. Just a mile or so in, I said, nodding toward the narrow trail leading into the woods. Lead the way, Ranger Nate. The path wound through towering trees and mossy rocks, the lake hidden from sight until the very last bend. I could hear Alex breathing behind me, steady but heavier than mine. We weren't talking much anymore, just moving, listening to the crunch of boots on dirt and the occasional bird call echoing through the branches. When we finally emerged into the clearing, Alex let out a low whistle. Damn, this is beautiful. I dropped my pack, watching him walk toward the lake's edge. The last rays of sun turned the water into molten silver, the sky reflecting in still, glassy perfection. Towering pines encircled the area like quiet sentinels. How'd you find this place? He asked. Got lost on a solo hike once. Found this by accident, he smiled. Best wrong turn you ever made. We set up camp with the ease of familiarity. I pitched the tent while Alex gathered firewood, our roles well rehearsed. We'd done this enough times before, camping trips, hiking weekends, but never here, never alone like this. By the time we got the fire going and finished dinner, a simple stir-fry over the camp stove, the air had cooled considerably. I zipped up my jacket as the sun dipped below the horizon. Alex poked at the fire with a stick. So, I've got a bit of a problem. I glanced over. What kind of problem? He stood and rummaged through his bag, pulling out what looked like a deflated blanket. My sleeping bag zipper is totally screwed. Tried fixing it earlier, it's useless. He held it up. The zipper had completely separated, hanging loose and impossible to close. The forecast said low 40s tonight, I said, frowning. Yeah, I know. I was hoping it would hold. I looked down at my own sleeping bag, a winter-grade model technically made for two if necessary, roomy, insulated. My heart kicked up just thinking about it. You can crash in mine, I said, trying to sound nonchalant. It's big enough. Better than waking up frozen. Really? You sure? Of course. His shoulders relaxed, that golden smile blooming across his face. Thanks, man. I promise I don't snore much. We stayed up a little longer, warming our hands by the fire, trading stories. He talked about work, I told him. I'm about to share a weird gig I did photographing a couple's mountaintop wedding where the bride's veil blew into a tree and got stuck midair. We laughed until our ribs hurt, but as the flames burned lower and the cold crept closer, I couldn't stop glancing at the tent, at the sleeping bag waiting inside, at the friend I'd been quietly in love with for 3 years. This trip was supposed to be a break, a breath of fresh air, but as I watched him rub his hands together and smile at me across the flickering firelight, I knew deep down this weekend might change everything, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for what that meant. Dinner was easy, a one-pan stir-fry over the portable stove with just enough seasoning and smoke to make it taste like something you'd never get back in the city. Alex sat cross-legged across the fire from me, chewing contentedly and sipping from his water bottle like we were kings out here, just two guys at home in the middle of nowhere. The stars were starting to break through the navy sky above, faint at first, then sharp and bright. The lake was still and black beside us, mirroring the pines that circled its edges. The fire crackled, and the night air grew colder. This is perfect, Alex said between mouthfuls. Seriously, Nate, I needed this. I smiled, hiding my mouth behind the red metal cup. Glad you came, he leaned back on his hands, stretching his legs out toward the fire. You always know the best spots. If I'd planned this trip, we'd be sleeping in a puddle behind a 7-Eleven. You're not giving yourself enough credit, I replied. You remembered marshmallows and forgot a sleeping bag, he added dryly. I glanced toward his gear, which sat in a slightly disheveled pile just outside the tent. That bad? He stood up, walked over to his pack, and pulled out the mangled mess of nylon and frustration, holding it up like a defeated flag. He showed me the damage. Worse than I thought, he said, shaking his head. It's basically a glorified blanket now. I stepped closer and saw what he meant. The zipper had completely separated, unrepairable without tools or serious effort. It couldn't hold heat, not in this weather. It's supposed to drop to the low 40s tonight, I murmured, frowning. I know, he rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous gesture I'd seen too many times before. Look, I hate to ask, but your sleeping bag's that big winter one, right? My pulse kicked up. I looked at the tent behind us, at the double-wide, Sub-Zero rated bag I'd bought for a winter solo trip that never happened, the one sitting open inside. Yeah, I said, trying to sound relaxed. It's got room. Alex smiled, grateful and a little sheepish. We'll be snug, but I promise I won't hog the blanket. I gave him a casual shrug, even though my heart was pounding against my ribs. Better than you freezing out here. We went through the motions of cleaning up camp, sealing food in the bear-proof container, dousing the fire, and making one last trip to the makeshift bathroom spot. The whole time, I tried not to watch him too closely. I often wonder what it would feel like to lie next to him, skin brushing skin, breath mingling in a space too small for anything but truth. Inside the tent, I laid the sleeping bag flat, unzipped halfway to make climbing in easier. The lantern cast a warm glow against the nylon walls, flickering as the breeze tapped the fabric. Alex changed quickly, down to a t-shirt and flannel pajama pants. I did the same, facing the opposite direction, pretending not to glance when his shirt lifted again or when the muscles in his back shifted under his skin. So how do you want to do this? He asked, standing awkwardly near the tent entrance. You get in first, I said. You'll be against the wall, that way you don't have to climb over me if you need to get up. He nodded and slid into the sleeping bag, wriggling into place with exaggerated care. Roomy enough for a king, I killed the lantern, plunging the tent into darkness, broken only by a faint silver light filtering through the fabric. I crawled beside him slowly, trying not to make it weird, but there was no way to avoid it. The bag was tight, our legs touched, our arms bumped, his shoulder pressed into mine with every breath. We lay there stiffly, wordless, surrounded by silence and the occasional sound of night creatures in the forest. "This is kind of awkward, huh?" Alex whispered with a nervous chuckle. "A bit," I admitted. "But at least we're not freezing." He shifted slightly, turning onto his side, facing away. The movement brought my chest up against his back. I hesitated, unsure what to do with my arm. Then I did it, slowly, cautiously. I draped it over his waist. It felt natural, practical, I told myself, but it was more than that. He didn't flinch, didn't tense, just settled into the position like it was nothing. "Is this okay?" I asked softly. "Yeah," he said, his voice low and rough with something I couldn't place. "It's comfortable." His body gradually relaxed, mine didn't, not entirely. My heart was pounding, my skin was hot despite the chill outside the tent. Every breath he took reverberated through me. We stayed like that for a long time, then in a voice so quiet I almost missed it, he asked, "Nate, have you wanted something but were afraid to admit it, even to yourself?" My mouth went dry, I swallowed hard. "Yeah," I whispered. "I have." Silence for a long moment. I thought I'd gone too far, that I'd said something I shouldn't have. Then he moved his hand, the one resting near his stomach, sliding back. He found my hand where it lay against his waist, slowly, carefully curling his fingers around mine, intertwining them. His grip was soft, not playful, not friendly, just there. My breath caught, my chest filled with everything I couldn't say. My eyes burned with unshed emotion. He didn't say anything else, neither did I, but our fingers stayed locked together, tangled like roots under soil, hidden from the world but growing in the dark just the same. I didn't sleep, I lay awake all night, listening to the rhythm of his breath, feeling the warmth of his skin. His words, his hand finding mine, the way he didn't let go. The tent was quiet, the forest peaceful, but inside me, everything was changing, and that was just the beginning. I woke before he did. The faint light of early morning seeped through the tent fabric, casting everything in soft gray. For a few seconds, I lay still, caught in the silence. Then I felt it again, his hand still in mine, his back warm against my chest, our bodies tangled beneath the sleeping bag like they'd never known how to be apart. I should have moved, but I didn't. Eventually, Alex stirred, a small shift, a subtle inhale. Then he blinked awake, and the weight of what we'd shared in the dark settled like dew in the air between us. He didn't pull away immediately, just lay there staring at the ceiling of the tent with his brows drawn together like he was solving a problem. Then, wordlessly, he slid out of the sleeping bag. I sat up slowly, watching him stretch in the narrow space, his shirt riding up, jaw tight. "Morning," I offered, trying to sound casual. He nodded. "Morning." He grabbed his water bottle and stepped outside without another word. That set the tone for the morning. No eye contact, no jokes, just quiet movements as we made breakfast, scrambled eggs over the stove, toast that leaned more toward burnt than golden. He barely spoke, and when he did, his voice was flat, neutral. It shouldn't have hurt, but it did. After we ate, we cleaned up in silence. The trees swayed overhead, birds chattered nearby, and yet the world between us felt still, suspended in something we hadn't named. We took the trail down to the lake to rinse the pans. The air was crisp, and the surface of the water gleamed like a mirror. Alex crouched at the edge, scrubbing quietly. I joined him, both of us pretending we were fine, pretending that last night hadn't happened. But every time our shoulders brushed or our fingers almost touched, I saw him flinch, not in disgust, something more like confusion. It wasn't until later, after we'd hiked a few trails and the sun had climbed high, that things started to shift again. We came back to the lake to swim. I waded in first, letting the cold water bite at my skin until the shock faded and left only calm. Alex followed, gasping dramatically as he dove under and surfaced right beside me. "Jesus, that's cold," he laughed, slicking his wet hair back from his face. "You'll live," I said, splashing him lightly. "Oh, it's on," he grinned, and the next thing I knew, he lunged. We wrestled in the water, laughing, shoving, ducking each other beneath the surface. It was reckless and messy and familiar, but there were moments, brief flashes, where it shifted. When his hands lingered too long, when his chest pressed against mine just a second more than it should have. At one point, I caught him staring at me with the usual light in his eyes, but something deeper, something searching. By the time we returned to camp, our clothes hung on a line to dry, and we were sitting by the fire again. The air between us wasn't heavy anymore. As charged, he was quieter that evening, more introspective. He kept fidgeting with the drawstring of his hoodie, stealing glances at me when I wasn't looking. After dinner, we didn't even pretend to stay up late. The fire burned low, and he finally said, "I think I'm going to turn in." "Yeah, me too." Inside the tent, he climbed into the sleeping bag first again. I followed slower this time, unsure of what I was stepping into. The zipper clicked shut, sealing us in, but the space between us was wider than the night before. Even though we were still pressed close by necessity, we lay in silence. Then he spoke. I almost didn't come. His voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the dark like a blade. "What?" I asked, turning slightly toward him. He was on his back, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. I made up like 3 excuses not to, said work was too crazy, that I needed to see family, that my gear wasn't ready. "Why?" he exhaled shakily. "Because I was scared of what?" His eyes found mine then, and my breath caught at how I might feel if we were alone. The air left my lungs. Alex shifted onto his side, facing me now. His face was shadowed, unreadable, but his voice trembled. "I've been thinking about you, Nate, for months." And I kept pushing it down, telling myself it was nothing, just closeness, just friendship. I didn't move, I didn't breathe. "But last night," he continued, "when you put your arm around me, when I held your hand, I didn't want to let go, and that scared the hell out of me." He reached out slowly, fingertips brushing mine again in the dark. "I've been thinking about you in ways I didn't let myself understand before." I turned toward him fully, and for the first time in days, I let myself hope. "Me too." And then I kissed him, or maybe he kissed me. I'm not sure who moved first, but the space between us vanished. His lips were soft, tentative at first, as if he expected me to pull away, but I didn't, I couldn't. He deepened the kiss, hands sliding up to cup my face, my fingers tangled in the fabric of his hoodie, pulling him closer. The tent was quiet except for the sounds of our breathing, our lips parting and finding each other again. The kiss wasn't perfect, messy and unsure, but it was real. When we finally broke apart, his forehead rested against mine, his breath warm on my lips. "I've never kissed a guy before," he whispered. "How was it?" His grin was slow, kind of amazing. We lay there for a long time, kissing between soft laughter, between whispered truths. He traced the back of my hand with his thumb, I tucked his hair behind his ear. Eventually, exhaustion took hold. He curled against me, head tucked beneath my chin, one leg slung over mine. The sleeping bag cocooned us, and for the first time, it didn't feel too tight, it felt like home. And as I lay there with his hand still in mine, the sound of the lake outside and his breath against my throat, I realized something, everything had changed, and I had no idea what came next. Yet there was much yet to come. I woke to the soft warmth of Alex's breath against my neck for a moment. I didn't move, just listened to the birdsong outside, the faint rustling of trees, the steady rhythm of his breathing. His arm was draped over my chest, his bare leg tangled with mine beneath the sleeping bag. He was pressed against me like he belonged there, like he'd always belonged there. And the strangest part? There was no panic, no confusion, no regrets, just peace. I turned slightly, careful not to jostle him too much, and found him already awake, eyes still hazy with sleep but soft with something I didn't quite have a name for yet. "Morning," I whispered. He smiled. "Hey." We didn't say anything else for a while, we didn't need to. He leaned in and kissed me, slow and sleepy sweet. His fingers brushed my jaw, my chest, and just like that, we weren't friends pretending anymore. We were something else, something real. Later, as we cooked breakfast over the camp stove, eggs and leftover potatoes, Alex kept bumping my hip with his grin. Every time I rolled my eyes, he stole a kiss while flipping the pan and nearly dropped the spatula. "You're terrible at this," I teased. "I'm distracted," he said. "Shameless. You're the one making hard eyes at me while I'm trying to cook." "I am not." He kissed me again before I could protest, leaving me breathless and laughing. After we ate, we packed our small day bags and hiked one of the side trails that curved deeper into the forest, the canopy growing thicker as we went. We didn't talk about what we were doing, we didn't label it. But his hand found mine as naturally as if it always had, and I held on like I never wanted to let go. We stopped at a small waterfall I discovered a year ago and never shared with anyone else. The water tumbled down mossy rocks into a crystal-clear pool, and the sun filtered through the trees in golden ribbons. Alex stood close, water misting his skin, his smile softer than I'd ever seen it. "I've always loved being out in nature," he said, fingers grazing mine, "but this is different." "How so?" "I'm not just seeing it now, I'm feeling it, all of it, like it's wrapped around me, and I finally get to exhale." He kissed me then, against the sound of water and wind, like it was the only thing he wanted to do in the world, and I kissed him back fiercely, gratefully, like I wanted that moment forever. We took photos, mostly of the trees and the water and the light, but then Alex handed me the camera and said, "Us too." He pulled me into the frame, and we took one together, then another one where he kissed my cheek, one where we just stared at each other, smiling like idiots, moments frozen in time, proof that what we were feeling was real. That afternoon, as we lay on a sun-warmed rock beside the lake, his head resting on my chest, we finally talked about the things we'd been too afraid to say. "What happens when we go home?" he asked quietly. I took a breath. "We figure it out one step at a time. People will ask questions, they always do." He was quiet for a while, then he said, "I think I'm okay with that as long as..." I kissed the top of his head and held him tighter that night. After the fire had burned low and the stars blinked to life above our tent, we climbed into the sleeping bag again. But it wasn't like before. There was no hesitation, no lingering question about whether this was okay. We already knew the answer. Alex turned toward me, eyes catching the silver-blue moonlight that filtered through the tent. "Nate," he said, his voice low and unsteady, "I've never felt this way before with anyone." I cupped his face, brushing my thumb along his cheek. "Me neither." He kissed me first this time, deep and slow and full of something reverent, like he was trying to memorize the shape of my lips, the sound of my breath. Clothes came off gradually between kisses and laughs and trembling fingers. His hands explored like he was discovering a world he never knew he needed. My body responded to his every touch like it had been waiting for this, for him. We made love in the dark, quiet and close, our bodies pressed together in the narrow cocoon of the sleeping bag that had brought us here. The way he moved, the way he touched me was careful and curious and charged with everything we hadn't said but now no longer needed to. There were no sharp lines, no rules to follow, just us wrapped in heat and heartbeats and gasps that only we could hear. He kissed down my chest like he was tracing a map, like I was something sacred. And when we finally reached the edge and fell together, trembling and breathless, I didn't feel scared, I felt found. After we lay tangled in each other, the sleeping bag pulled around our waists, skin warm against skin, he pressed soft kisses along my shoulder, his fingers drawing lazy shapes across my stomach. "I can't believe this is real," he whispered. "It is," he looked up at me. "Promise me something, anything, don't let this be a one-time thing." I smiled and kissed him again, I wasn't planning on it. He nestled closer, his head beneath my chin, one leg draped over mine like we'd been sleeping this way for years. Outside, whispers flowed through the pines, inside the tent was still and warm and filled with everything we didn't know how to say yet. And as I wrapped my arms around him and pulled him close, feeling his heartbeat slow against mine, I realized something with a kind of terrifying clarity. I had never felt more sure of anything in my life. And I know this is not the end. We are in a tent again. He kissed me like he wasn't in a tent in the woods in the middle of nowhere, but like we were the only two people that had ever existed. Every touch was a question, and every answer was breathless. When his hand slid down my side across the curve of my hip, I shivered, not from the cold, but from the way it felt to finally be wanted by the one person I thought I could never have. My hand threaded through his hair, and he leaned into it like it grounded him. Our legs tangled again, bare now, nothing between us but skin and the tension we'd been building for years. He kissed down my neck slow and deliberate, like he was learning my pulse. When his lips reached my collarbone, he paused, just breathing me in. I could feel his heart against mine, fast and unsure but steadying with every shared gasp. "I don't know what I'm doing," he whispered against my chest, and it wasn't hesitation, it was reverence. "You're doing everything right," I said, my voice thick with want. His fingers moved over my stomach, tracing the ridges there, slipping lower with maddening patience. The sleeping bag cocooned us, holding in our heat, our scent. Every time we touched, it was like the boundary between us disappeared, like we weren't just lying next to each other but inside the same current, the same flame. He rolled us gently, climbing over me with a careful kind of hunger. The moonlight made his eyes look almost translucent, lit from within. His hands framed my face as he looked down at me, his thumb brushing along my lips. "I've thought about this," he confessed. "Ever let myself believe it would happen?" I didn't answer with words. I pulled him down and kissed him deep, anchoring laced with everything I couldn't say. Our hips moved together slowly at first, learning each other's rhythm. His skin was hot, his breath even hotter. I arched into him like he was the only thing keeping me from unraveling. We didn't rush, there was no need. We took our time exploring, unwrapping, exhaling. We learned the places that made each other tremble, the spots that made our breathing catch. We clung to each other in the dark, learning the shape of this new thing between us, building it with every movement, every whispered name, every soft moan. When we finally collapsed into one another, our bodies slick and breathless, it wasn't just release, it was arrival. We lay there for what felt like forever, our hands still roaming in slow, absent-minded patterns. He kissed the side of my jaw again and again, like he couldn't stop, like he didn't want to. And I didn't want him to either, because nothing in my life had ever felt more right than Alex falling asleep in my arms, skin to skin, heart to heart, finally mine. The rain started just before dawn, soft and steady like a lullaby against the tent fabric. I stirred beneath the sleeping bag, the weight of Alex still draped over me, warm and grounding. His head rested against my chest, his breath steady and slow. One of his legs was tangled with mine, and his arm was possessively locked around my waist, like his body knew something his mind was still catching up to. I didn't want to move. The tent was dim, the sky outside still gray and sleepy, and for once, I didn't care that our gear was getting damp or that we had to hike out later. All I wanted was this, him here. He shifted slowly, nuzzling his face into my chest with a sleepy hum. "I can hear you thinking," he mumbled, his voice rough with sleep. I smiled and kissed his forehead. "Good thoughts. Very good ones, I hope." He lifted his head slightly, his hair sticking up in all directions, his sleepy grin. I whispered, "Do my chest ache?" We didn't say much that morning, we didn't need to. We kissed lazily beneath the blanket, sharing the kind of quiet affection that didn't require explanation. Eventually, though, the real world started tugging at us. The tent was getting colder, the rain didn't seem like it was letting up, and we had to start packing. Alex sat cross-legged near the fire pit, watching the smoke curl into the wet air as I rolled up our sleeping gear. He looked peaceful but pensive. "You okay?" I asked. He looked over and nodded. "Yeah, just thinking." I sat beside him, close enough that our knees touched. "About this place, this weekend. It's going to stay with me no matter what happens next." I reached for his hand, intertwining our fingers. "Me too." We worked in sync, dismantling camp just as efficiently as we'd set it up. Only this time, there were pauses between tasks, a kiss after folding the tent, a hug when we sealed the last food bag, Alex's hand brushing mine every time we passed gear between us. The hike back was slow, partly because of the rain-slick trail, but mostly because we kept stopping, pausing beneath trees, kissing when we thought no one would ever know. Every time he looked at me with that quiet smile, it hit me again, this wasn't just a fling. It wasn't just some kissing moment in the woods, we were something now. At the car, he tossed his pack in and then turned to me, rain dripping from his hair. "Wait," he said suddenly. "What?" He stepped forward and pulled me into him, wet jacket and all. "Before we go back." His mouth found mine in the rain. It was slower than before, sure, certain. When we finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "I love you, Nate. I think I've known for a while, I just didn't let myself believe it." My heart nearly burst, my hand over the console only letting go when I needed both hands for the road. We talked about normal things, movies, work, whether the Thai place near his apartment was still open. But beneath all that was something deeper, unspoken, present. We were already building something. As we neared the city, he squeezed my hand. "What's funny?" he asked. "What?" I was terrified of coming back to the real world after this, but now I think I'm excited. "Why?" "Because I still get to do all the same things I love, coffee runs, movie nights, trail hikes. But now I get to do them with you." I smiled, warmth blooming in my chest. "Yeah, and now I get to kiss you afterward." He grinned and kissed my knuckles. It's like I'm falling in love with my best friend all over again, but this time for real. When we reached his place, neither of us moved to get out immediately. The rain tapped on the roof, the world outside was still, like it was waiting.